All right, everybody, it's September 23rd, 2021. This is the DLIS webinar, Social Networking and Collaboration. My name is Michael Crossfox, and I'm just going to take a moment now to introduce our host and special guest. Our host is Luke Henke, who is your current DLIS Symposiarch, and he's going to be discussing the benefits of membership to the Special Library Association as represented by our LIS liaison, Tom Nielsen. Tom is a adjunct professor at York College Library, which is part of the City University of New York library system. And he's also, as I just mentioned, our rep for our liaison for the Special Libraries Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you, Tom. Luke, take it away.
Sure. So, Tom, first and foremost, just want to thank you for your time this afternoon speaking with us. And just to get started, can you tell the students a little bit about what the Special Libraries Association is and the work that they do? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. The Special Libraries Association is a membership organization for librarians who mainly work in different types of libraries outside of, say, public and school libraries. So we have a lot of librarians who are in academia, uh, lots of librarians who are in government libraries for, um, let's see, corporate, definitely, legal libraries, people who are solo librarians, they're alone in the company that they work for or whatever the institution is that they work in. Yeah, and lots of different places like that, maybe like museums or cultural heritage organizations too. So it's a, a wide breadth of different places that our members are working. And uh, the main focus for those members is learning from each other. Because if you have, say, a librarian who's at the United States Tennis Association, they're going to have a very different library work experience and processes than a librarian like myself, who's an adjunct at an academic institution. So we use that as a real value point to kind of just like talk about what are you doing and how does that differ from how you do your cataloging or your reference services. That's kind of in a nutshell, that's kind of what's going on at SLA.
Great. And what kind of resources would you say that the SLA provides to its members?
Sure, yeah. So what some of the main value that we provide through membership is definitely education. So that comes in the form of a conference that we do every year, usually in the summer. And the main content generators for conference sessions are the members. So we're not like going outside necessarily for a lot of content, but there are a lot of people who uh, could be tapped by members who come and do panel discussions about different things. Um, we also have certificate programs in different areas. One of them I know that's about copyright. Um, let's see, I haven't done these, so I'm a little rusty on what they are exactly, but I think there's like 3 or 4, maybe a handful of those. What else did I have? Oh, and then we also have a learning hub, which is a uh, a place on the SLA website where members can go if they want to go back to hear webinars that different communities within the association have recorded and can listen to, kind of like this session itself. Yeah. So education, the communities themselves are a real value source for librarians because like I was saying before, the breadth of the association is fairly wide. So not only do we have regional communities, like say there's communities in California and Canada and here in New York, but there's also there's an international scope to SLA. So we do have members that are in Asia and India and in Europe. So it's nice to get their perspective too on how things are going for them in their libraries. And then networking is another just kind of automatic resource that we have available for members. So that, like I was saying before, if you want to find out, you're having a challenge at your library about how to do a specific reference service, like, something remote, trying to refine your remote reference service, you can talk to all different kinds of people, and you can use a community forum that SLA has set up to just kind of ask that question, put it out there, and just see who responds to it. And that's very valuable because there's, people are coming from all different places. So that's a few of the resources.
Thank you. You were speaking to the importance of communities in the library and information science field. Can you speak a little bit to your personal experience in the regard of how communities have helped you, or how the library community has helped you, or how maybe you have found certain groups that have been particularly useful in your professional and academic experience?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So when in the late 90s, I was a librarian for an engineering firm, and it was just myself and an assistant. So that was, before that, I was one of the librarians at the Environmental Protection Agency. So that kind of a job has kind of a, a larger infrastructure and lots of support with that. Whereas this engineering firm kind of was one of those corporate places where the library was almost forgotten. So my role was to support the engineers, because at that particular engineering firm, the engineers specifically wanted a librarian because they needed the support that librarian would provide them. Because like law firms, engineering firms also often work on that. I'm just kind of like losing the name of what it's called, but your time is money, even when you're an employee. So they can't just drop everything, go to the library and have like a 5-minute conversation with the librarian, which I would probably do, and ask for what they need, and then I'll take 5 minutes, look for it, get it for them, and etc. They can't necessarily do that. So the transition from me from going from the EPA to this engineering firm was challenging because I had never been responsible for a library myself. So the thing that I did was, that was around the time when I joined SLA, and they have a community specifically for solo librarians. And within that solo librarians community, there's a lot of chatting going on about, I got this going on, does anybody have this? Can they help me with that? And it runs the gamut, because solo librarians do it all, right? So it could be a cataloging question, it could be a reference question, it could be, just a human resources question. How do I deal with this strange and crazy patron or something like that, right? So that was a gold mine for me, getting support from other solo librarians and just hearing what they deal with as a way to get a sense of how I can deal better with the circumstances that came up for me. that answering your question there?
Oh, yeah, certainly. And I think that's a real benefit for the students to hear about because I think, you know, a lot of students might find themselves in institutions, whether it's an archive or a library, no matter in what kind of organization it's in, they might find themselves working for themselves or in a very small team. And it's very possible because you're in that small team and you can't go to people in other departments in those circumstances for answers. It's
Right.
extremely helpful to have that support system behind you so that you can at least get a second opinion on something and you're not just making decisions based on your own experience because of course we all have our limitations, we all have personal interests and our own experiences to work off of. And so if that's all we're working on, it could lead to kind of like you know, it's much more useful when you have different opinions and you can kind of brainstorm different ideas about what might be the right decision to make for any project that you're working on or any collection that you're working with. So I think the support system is something that I see personally as a real benefit for SLA or being a member of SLA is having that constant support system. Like I said,
Yeah.
especially because a lot of students would probably find themselves working in institutions where they're going to be heavily relying on themselves or maybe just a single other person or maybe two to
Right.
to bounce answers back and forth off of.
Yeah.
Now, I also wanted to see if you could speak to the importance of being a part of professional organizations like SLA throughout your academic career, or throughout your career in general. Um, what would you say is the incentive for a student to join, other than the support system we've been talking about? What else might be a benefit from joining these sorts of professional organizations?
Um, one of the things that's really helpful for a professional like ourselves, uh, when we are a member of a professional organization, that organization often offers opportunities that a workplace wouldn't offer, specifically in terms of gaining leadership experience. Uh, Oftentimes, the type of leadership that you can get within your workplace is somewhat predictable in that you're moving up and you're managing other people below you. It's a totally different thing to manage people who are volunteers than managing people who are obligated because that you pay them to be there, right? So it takes a little bit more finessing to kind of just be a little milder in how you approach when things are not necessarily going your way. And SLA provides that in, I'll go back to the communities again. The SLA communities have a 3-person structure for leadership of the community. Usually it's like the leader of the community. There's often a secretary, someone who will take minutes for meetings or things like that. And then often, the next person in line, like what we used to call the chair-elect or something like that. So within that structure, there's an opportunity for students or new professionals to kind of get involved in different things like working on a website for a community or programming, thinking of ideas for programs, webinars to have for a community, and working with other people within that community. And that's another of the great networking opportunities that the association provides. But then as you get familiar with that community and with the people that you're working with there, you may feel more comfortable about actually trying to, take on that leadership role of the community. And then, there are other places further up that chain where you can find leadership opportunities as well within the association, all the way up to the board of the association itself. And I have done that little leadership trajectory within my time at SLA, and it's very valuable to meet different people and work with them, because when you're working with some of those other colleagues within the association, it's not like working with colleagues at a workplace. It's helpful to have not only the work that you're doing for the association, but it's so rewarding to just get to know them personally. Because if they're from even from Oklahoma or from California or Texas or something like that, it's like, what is life like for you? I mean, I don't go to these places, right? So what are you doing down there? What is your library like? That's like enriching for me as an individual to know those things. And I love talking to people about their libraries, definitely, but also about what's going on with their lives. And I think I find that very rewarding.
No, I agree. I think that's really interesting. And I think that's also a benefit of SLA, is that we've been talking about building these networks and these communities, and the community doesn't even necessarily have to be tied to a geographic location. I mean, your community can be, like you were mentioning, if there's, a set number of librarians who are working in architectural firms, or like you were saying, engineering firms or law firms. I mean, that's a community in and of itself. And like we were talking about, those are people you can kind of bounce ideas back and forth on. You can collaborate. Definitely leads for avenues for potential collaborations, partnerships, which could attract stakeholders for your business, if stakeholders are a part of your work. So yeah, I think that's important too, is to mention that, yeah, like you were saying, you could be talking to somebody in Oklahoma or California, wherever they may be, and their experience is much different than somebody who's living in an urban area like New York City. But at the same time, their experience and their professional experience is definitely applicable to the work that we do in our profession. So I think that's another benefit to organizations like SLA.
Yeah, I think one of the I'm trying to think of the right word for this. One of the, I'm not sure if it's an advantage, but something that has been informative for the association has been the experience of urban special librarians who have exposure to diverse populations that we serve. Because this has come up lately within SLA, and that we're trying to be more welcoming to different populations. And by different populations, I'm not just talking about a racial thing, but also people who have handicaps, different abled people, or people who are, have trauma in their past or something like that, right? Whatever kind of trauma. So we're trying to be sensitized. We're trying to sensitize ourselves a little bit more to those members who may have that experience within their life experience. And oftentimes people like myself who am working for an academic institution that's mostly 90% non-white students, it's something that I've been aware of since I've been working there. So I'm trying to bring that to SLA as well. And the counterpoint to that is, again, that there are plenty of places that people are working who are SLA members who don't have that diversity at all, right? And just white folks that they're working with. So, I mean, they've got nothing to go on really, except their own life experience if they have that. So it's nice to be able to add something like that to the association and, think of, programming to do around that topic. Just another example.
And with regards to programming, how has SLA in your experience supported the programs that you do at your institution?
When you say that,
Like, I guess, how have you taken your experiences with SLA and applied that to the work that you've done, either in the firm that you were talking about or at York College?
right. I think that I would say that being an SLA and being part of leadership for SLA has given me a lot more confidence, definitely, as not only who feels more comfortable being a leader in the workplace as well, right? So just the different things that we're tasked to do as leader within SLA would give me experiences that I've not had before. Feeling like I'm more responsible uh, as a person just in general. So taking that to other situations that I'm in, and it could be like volunteering in some other place outside of my work as well. So it's nice to have um, that boost of confidence that it gives. Um, I feel like I'm sorry, I'm kind of going back to you were talking about collaboration before, and I don't feel like I really talked about that very much. So I kind of wanted to just like say a little bit more about that. Is that all right?
Please.
Okay. Uh, in terms of collaborating within SLA, there's a lot of that happens because um, the different communities are putting together programs for the conference, right? So oftentimes uh, we may like if I'm I have an idea for a program and I think this program would be of interest to the leadership and management community. I would go to that community's leader and say, hey, I'm thinking of having a panel on this, leadership topic. Would you be interested in, going in with me and helping to put this program together? So there's that kind of collaboration that's going on just within SLA. Excuse me. But then last year, I thought that it might help SLA to hear from other library associations about how they were tackling diversity, like EDI issues, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so I contacted the woman who is, well, actually, I asked somebody from our Europe community if they knew anybody in SILIP, which is um, the Librarian Association in England, in Britain. And they said, "Oh yeah, sure, we'll have somebody contact you." So I was able to get in contact with the woman at SILIP who who had put together like a plan for their association for EDI. And so we had her on a webinar talk about, the plan that she put together, how she got, buy-in from the association. And that was like great to hear because it's informing SLA's work on the same topic. So there was that kind of collaboration that was also linked to another community to make that happen too. So I just wanted to offer that as examples that the collaborative spirit goes on between library associations too.
I'm glad to hear that because I was curious whether or not there's hostility between library associations. I can't imagine there would be because from my experience,
I
this
think you're
tends
muted.
to be, oh, am I?
Oh, oh, sorry, it's me. Sorry.
Okay, not a problem. Can you hear me?
Sometimes my speaker goes out. I apologize.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, but I think that that is particularly useful because I think that sometimes you might expect that um, other organizations might kind of be competitive, or they might try to say, "Oh, we're the premier library association," or "We're the go-to, we're the one with the highest membership." But to know that there is that cross collaboration across the with different organizations, different professional organizations, I think that's really helpful. And it speaks to my experience in the field because by and large, I mean, librarians seem to, and information professionals in general, seem to want to help each other, whether it's progressing their research or helping, somebody in their community or whatever the case may be. It seems like this profession seems to be a pretty uh, people seem to be pretty reliable in the sense that they're more than willing to offer help in any way that they can, and they're willing to offer suggestions for innovation or ways to make your life a little easier while you're getting your work done, because of course at the end of the day we're all here to serve the community and help people access information, so I'm
Right.
glad to hear that. But I think that collaborations are also really important for students to understand because, I mean, when you're going into a workplace, some people might just have the idea, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to sit at a desk, or I'm going to do my scanning, or I'm going to do X, Y, and Z job. But really understanding that there is that communication necessary in the workplace and maintaining valuable relationships and fostering relationships with people in the community. I think that's really important, and specifically how you can work with other people to inform their work and also inform the work that you do for your institution. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah, definitely.
I did want to ask, how, if in any way, has COVID affected the um, events, or you mentioned the conference that happens? I don't know if that's usually a virtual conference or an in-person conference, but how has COVID affected the happenings of SLA?
Definitely. So it's definitely affected the conference. It's always been an in-person conference. So for the past 2 years, it's now been a virtual conference. And we're hoping next year to go to Charlotte, North Carolina for an in-person conference. So we'll see what happens. But I think that the result of that there's kind of been two things that have come out of that. One is that being forced to have a virtual conference has caused us to, look into ways of doing the conference virtually and making it happen in a way that is, you know, implementing best practices, right? Because of a body of experience is already there to tap into about virtual conferencing. So we've kind of been able to do that. And, there's always the little glitch, like my speaker not working for me, that happens at a virtual conference too. And, but in instances like that, what's happened is often very interesting in that the librarians are very chatty and they're all over the chat. Man, it's just like, it's almost a distraction, but it's fun too. So that's been a very interesting development because of COVID. And another thing that's happened is one of the results of COVID, I think, has also been that we've had a board leading our organization that has stayed on for another whole year longer than they would have, which I'm not sure if that's happening in other associations, but it did in SLA. And that was a bit of a controversial thing because there were people within the association who wanted the regular turnover every year of board members. But then there were also a lot of people like myself who were feeling actually safer and more comfortable with just sticking with the way things were with the same board as long as people were willing and could do that. So, and those decisions were being made in the middle months of 2020, right when we were so, up in the air about what does this mean, what's going to happen, right? So it's been a little bit disruptive, but we did have a little task force that looked into, how special libraries were responding and policies they were putting into place, and that was interesting to hear from that task force about what was going on. So, yeah, it's had an effect, but we're hoping to get back to normal next year.
Fingers crossed. We'll be able to make it to Charlotte.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually exhausted my questions that I've had for you. I don't know if Michael had any questions or if you had any questions for us.
I'll jump in.
Sure.
Luke, the question I have for Tom is, in your experience, what has been the biggest change in librarianship that you've seen over the course of your career?
Oh, wow. I guess, I talked about that EPA job, and I remember part of that job was to like take care of the web presence for the library. And the web has just like gone like 500 miles beyond my capabilities. So definitely that has changed so much. And even, just Luke and I were just talking about the challenges of technology. Just that technology is so complicated in itself, right? The fact that we're able to do this, this kind of thing, that's like, it seems so crazy. Like, in 1999, when I'm like a 4-year-old librarian, we would never have thought this was like, what? That's crazy. That's Star Trek. Yeah,
Right.
I think that's what probably one of the things I'm kind of trying to think of. I guess one of the things that I think is amazing is that I am able to work as an adjunct at CUNY and still kind of be, I don't know, like still able to support myself. I think that that's amazing to me because I'm only working part-time, and I just think it's so valuable for our profession to have that different options for librarians, right? Like it's not just that the folks that are listening to this webinar are thinking, I have to go into a full-time library position when I finish and get my degree. And that's not necessarily how it has to be. Like there are positions that are part-time that are paying reasonably well that you can get into to kind of, just get yourself something until a full-time gig comes along. And that was actually very much my experience when I got my degree back in like 1995 and 1996. I was working part-time at 2 different places before I finally got that APA job. And it's very nerve-wracking, but it's also very important that employers are providing those options too.
Yeah, that's something that I'm very familiar with. I have I monitor a lot of jobs and job opportunities and postings as part of my work here in DLIS. And the it does, I will kind of raise this one point that it does border on exploitive exploitate exploitation, because it's, if that becomes the norm, for instance, Long Island, right, the community that we primarily source our students from, Nassau and Suffolk County, they are, for the most part, the public libraries are for the most part civil service. And so that's why we offer the webinars and other continuing ed opportunities here, so that our alumni can boost their scores by getting continuing ed units. But there's a lot of double dipping part-time work happening in Nassau and Suffolk County public libraries, where they work 7 hours a week at this library, and then they drive to this town and they work another 7 hours a week there, and then they work 4 hours a week, and then they have Saturday afternoons at this place. And
Right.
they're bouncing around, and that's a very valid way to start your career, as you did. But you don't want to be in that space 10, 15 years after being certified, after graduating. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of, coincidentally last year, the COVID being what it is, a lot of that forced a lot of retirements. A lot of people had to realize that they were essentially putting their life on the line. And you're 75 years old, go spend some time with the grandkids, you know. And a lot of people ended up vacating full-time positions. So that's been, it's cyclical here in the metropolitan area. We see NYPL doesn't hire anybody for 5 years, and then they hire 5,000 people in one summer. So, I chart that stuff. Um, but this is a question from Kathleen. What do you think about retiring as a public librarian? What I mean, you're in a special library situation, but you're part of CUNY, and CUNY law has, you guys are in a union, or the full-timers are in a union and part of the state pension system, but what does retirement look like for SLA members?
Right. Oh, so in the SLA context, it's kind of interesting because a lot of the people who have years of experience often start thinking about maybe going into business for themselves, right? Like if you feel like there's a particular niche that you've gotten fairly well versed in, a lot of people will start, offering themselves as a service, to like do expert searching or data services or something like that. That's what we hear about within the SLA context. I would say for myself, I'm semi-retired because I'm only working part-time, right? And that's fine for me. I'm perfectly happy with that. I that also gives me more time to actually do things with SLA and offer, more of my ideas and thoughts on what we can do for programming. Um, I think what you're saying about the the early career not having your sea legs yet, and then the late career it can happen as well, right? Kind of like losing that basis. And I think that is happening, and I do think it gets to kind of be exploitive. Uh, but what I think you probably are hearing this also these days in the newspapers about how the shortage of workers, right, within mostly essential working situations, but that's the only kind of thing that seems to be able to get across a message to employers that you need us, right? And we're not going to do it unless you're giving us something that we can really use, right?
Yeah, I think that's a broader, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, equity has to include compensation for employees and staff. And also, this came up from my dear friend Christian Zabriskie last semester or last year, where we have to negotiate our contracts. We have to have a pandemic clause in our contracts now and really specify how our employers are going to vouch for our personal safety, right? So
Right,
we're exploring these themes are happening across the country where we're talking about trauma librarianship, but we also have to talk about the trauma exposed that the librarians are exposed to in that, we're dealing with especially public libraries in a metropolitan area, you're dealing with people who are in crisis, emotional crisis, or a mental crisis, or even a health crisis, or they're unhoused, and there may be violence in your library. So, these are all topics that we have to, as a community of professionals, we have to come together and say and demand that our employers actually hear this because I grew up working in retail. And I can't tell you the number of times I've had people scream in my face.
oh, sure.
And at the end of the day, I tell them, you don't need the pair of jeans, honey. Like you're screaming in my face about a sock.
Yeah,
Like I bring that with me everywhere I go. Like this energy, like, oh, we're in the business of used books. That right? That's what the librarians are in the business of trafficking in used books. This is not life or death. Don't scream at me.
oh,
So but we have to, I think, and this experience over the last year, embracing these technologies, having synchronous in-person meetings with people from all around the world and all around the country, at the drop of a hat, I was able to socialize with friends I haven't seen since college because instead of spending 2 hours flying to Toronto, I said, meet me on Zoom at 7:30, and we were there. So we've embraced these technologies, but we need to mobilize this energy and move forward into what we think. Everybody says, "Oh, what is librarianship going to look like in 5 years?" It looks like us. We have to set the tone. We can't have these academic meta theory conversations about this. We have to actually manage our careers. So thank you, Tom, for talking to us about this today. I just want to tell students who are listening, it was kind of the theme when it comes to collaboration. Um, if you feel like you are reinventing the wheel, talk to somebody because chances are someone else next to you or someone in the local area has already answered the question. They've already designed the program and they may be willing to collaborate with you to meet the needs of your users. So don't be out there reinventing the wheel. If you get a sense like, oh, this is kind of taking a round shape and I can imagine where it's going to connect to the road and I can imagine where I'm going to put the axle, you've already gone too far. Borrow someone else's wheel. Your constituents will be very happy. Your users will be very happy to have a new wheel that you didn't have to invent. Well,
right.
thank you, Luke. Thank you, Tom. I'm going to just do some light housekeeping, as I call it. Bring everybody up to date on what to expect for the rest of the month. So October 7th, our webinar is going to be on the DLIS e-portfolio. If you're submitting your e-portfolio this semester, you might want to take a look at it, but this is generally we offer this e-portfolio webinar once a semester. This is for new or mid-program students who are curious about the e-portfolio or want some guidance on how to set it up. If you are submitting your e-portfolio this semester, you're more than welcome to attend, but you should already know this stuff. You should have already watched the ePortfolio webinar from last semester or the spring, whatever. Everybody's welcome. October 11th, we're going to open up our spring 2022 advisement period. So you'll get an email from me with who your advisor is and how to meet with that full-time faculty member and get advisement for designing your program of study for the spring, summer, and fall. We're going to focus on spring and summer. You'll get advised for the fall come spring 2022. But yeah, so if you're thinking about an internship or any kind of extracurricular that you want to do, start getting your paperwork together. October 11th is when advisement is going to open. Registration for the spring semester will open a few weeks after that, sometime in November. I haven't gotten the exact date from the Office of the Registrar yet. And then October 21st, we're having our webinar is going to focus on youth services, and we've got a panel of about 4 alumni who are 2 to 3 years out of the program and working in various youth services capacities, from branch heads, department heads, just to plain guerrilla style youth librarian with, you know, a napkin and hand sanitizer as their only defense against child-born illness, I'll call it. So October 21st, we'll be hearing from our friends in youth services. And finally, I just want to remind everybody that we are currently in Founders Week, and our patron, St. Vincent de Paul, taught a lot about service and making sure that you can see, let all things be done with charity is a quote that he's famous for. But Pope Paul VI told us that if we want peace, we must work for justice. And that is the theme of our Founders Week this week. So visit stjohns.edu/Founders Week for program details. There's a lot of synchronous online events taking place, and there's meditations and reflections on service and our work for justice. So thanks again, Tom. Thank you, Luke. You did a fantastic job. I knew you were a natural born to this, and you have a future in, well, personality for TV, but face for radio.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thanks
That
again,
offhanded
Tom.
comment.
All right, everybody. Have a good one, and we'll be in touch. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Michael.